hearing. They being May 21st at 7:30 here at the Milton Valdez School. We'll start off with a roll call.
Marie Bridges, Secretary.
Marty Gay.
Jamie Lowry.
Ron McGinn.
Rich Canong.
John McHenry.
Tad Redway Planner.
I need somebody to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it, Murray.
Okay. The motion has been approved and seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. Our agenda tonight, we have a public hearing. We have 4 items on the public hearing, the first of which is the proposed amendments to the Arundel land use ordinance in general, dealing with definitions, district regulations, and dimensional requirements. The second item is the proposed amendment to the Arundel land use ordinance performance standards, lighting, off-street parking, loading signs, pet daycare centers, contractor yards, and drive-through facilities. The third item is the proposed amendment to the Arundel land use ordinance new districts, Downtown Business District 1, Downtown Business District 2, Townhouse Corner District, Alfred Road Business District, Business Office Park Industrial District, and the Gateway District. The fourth item is the proposed amendments to the Arundel land use ordinance map, consisting of proposed zoning map changes and district descriptions in section 13. I would ask that if you have any comments that you step forward and state your name loudly, because it's being recorded and we'd like to be able to let anybody who wants to go onto the town website and see this know who's saying what. That being said, we'll jump right in. Item 1, proposed amendments to the Arundel land use ordinance. The section 2 definitions had just a couple of changes from the last hearing that we had. We have in definitions, we have added omitted use languages to the existing conditional use languages, and we have added a permitted uses definition. Are there any questions?
Y'all can find that on this sheet. If you're looking,
Yep.
you're looking
Right up here in the
for-
front. Any discussion on that section? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next section. Section 6.2, district regulations. The board has made no changes from the last public hearing. Are there any questions or comments concerning the district regulations? Hearing none, we'll move on to section 6.3, dimensional requirements. Again, no changes were made to this section from the last public hearing. Are there any comments or questions? Diane?
Sorry, Diane Robbins, Arundel. You were talking about section 6.
6.3.
I can't find anything that has a section 6.
There were no changes from the last public hearing that we had. There is a dimensional requirements table.
Did I miss one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Page 6.
I'll give you a minute to look at it, Diane.
It's okay, thank
It's
you.
okay? Okay. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, we will move on to item 2. Proposed amendments to the Arundel land use ordinance performance standards. Section 7.5 for lighting. There were a couple of minor changes made. We have changed it to when an outdoor installation is being substantially expanded. The planning board may require the entire lighting installation to be subject to the requirements. We're not saying that it has to be, we're saying that you might have to do it. And a lot of that will depend upon the scope of the changes that are being made.
Did you change the colors? Sorry,
We
Diane
did
Roberts.
change the color.
Okay, thank you.
It's not in this section. That's, you're talking about the color for signs? Yeah, that's another section,
okay,
and we will get
sorry.
to that. Okay, we also included the Gateway Alfred Road Business and the Townhouse Corner District as being subject to the standards. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next section. Off-street parking and loading. We made no changes to the recommendations from the previous public hearing. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next section. Section 712, signs. In 12.8, we made an adjustment to increase the number of times a commercial banner may displayed from 2 to 4 times a year, but we have decreased the duration from 30 days to 14 days. In section 712.13.5a, we've eliminated the limitation on color for the fuel prices. Originally, it said that it may consist only of white or gold lettering or numbering displayed on a background. We have eliminated that requirement. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to 8.28, pet daycare centers. For the next 3 items, 8.28, 8.29, and 8.3, we made no changes to any of the ordinances that were presented at the public hearing 2 weeks ago. So are there any questions on the pet daycare centers? Hearing none, we'll move on. Any questions on contractor yards? Hearing none, we'll move on. Any question on drive-through facilities?
Sorry, Richard, can I ask one question back on 8.28?
8.28, pet daycare centers?
Yeah. In the R4 district, which is the district that has the larger lot sizes, was there, and I'm just asking a question, was there a particular reason why you limited it to 24 dogs?
I think our discussion revolved around how many dogs would be too many. And because if you get a lot of dogs out there and they're all barking at one time, it may be too many.
Well, it wouldn't stop me from voting this, but one of the things that we may want to consider if we have to do any additional changes is to do some additional research on some of these larger ones, like there's one in Saco that's pretty large, the Paws. Because in sections of our town that the land can sustain more, I think that there should be an allowance if they're in an area that wouldn't affect a whole bunch of houses, and they have the acreage to support the additional animals. I think that we need to have a little more flexibility there.
Yeah, we can put that on the agenda to look at it at a future date.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes.
Diana, because we knew the comp plan committee was working on the residential and the rural conservation district, basically, this has been tailored for the smaller commercial districts. We will adjust this when we get into the rural conservation and residential districts.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 3. Proposed amendments to the Arundel Land Use Ordinance New Districts. We have the Downtown Business District 1 at 8.21. And there was a change that was made artists and craftsmen studios had been inadvertently deleted. Going back through, we had looked at it and seen where we had said that that would be a good use originally, and in the final draft, it ended up accidentally being deleted, so we have put that back in. We have increased the size of the post sign height for a single occupancy use from 8 feet to 10 feet. Nothing was changed in the downtown business district 2. Are there any questions on either one of those districts? There is none. We'll go on to the townhouse corner district, 8.23. We made no changes from the presentation of 2 weeks ago. Are there any questions on the townhouse corner district? Hearing none. Yes.
Okay, in the description here, it has Sinai Avenue. Is that a traditional name for Sinai Road?
That sounds awful creative. You can blame me for that.
Okay, no problem then.
We will adjust that.
Okay.
As soon as this passes town meeting, things like that, we'll know we can adjust that. Thank you.
That's after all the businesses.
Okay. Let's see, 8.24, the Alfred Road Business District. We had one adjustment. Medical marijuana caregiver production facility was a use that was to be allowed. It is no longer going to be allowed. Sorry, Keith.
Damn it.
I can tell you we're disappointed.
Can I ask why?
The general consensus from the public was that they didn't want it in there, so we took it out.
I think when the board looked at it, the difference from the two sides of the towns, the other business area where it would be allowed in that one, because of the high residential, higher
Oh, on the Alfred Road
residential,
side?
we decided it wasn't
Okay.
appropriate.
Any other questions on the Alfred Road District? Yes, sir.
My name's Richard Assad. I live on Alfred Road. I'm not sure if we're at that part yet, but extension of this district. We're talking about that.
Yep, we're at that section.
I guess I'm opposed to it. I don't guess, I know I'm opposed to it. But I would like to know what's driving it.
What's driving it is the fact that most of the eastern side of Route 111 is business with some residential property involved in it, and we're starting to get some feedback about allowing businesses into that area.
Oh, it's just extending, are you talking about extending it to the power line?
Yeah.
The consensus was that given there was a lot of pressure and a lot of concern to expand business opportunities, and it was a natural place, undeveloped in the large sections of the land, that it would be appropriate to extend that business district farther down to the power line, which is a natural boundary.
I just go all the way to line.
There was discussion about that, but we're going to let the comp plan committee, you know,
I am directly affected by this. I suspect my taxes are going to go up. Cover.
You don't change use, it probably shouldn't, it shouldn't impact your tax rate unless you change the use. But, and I'm saying that, I'm not the expert on that, but always in provision within our ordinance was to expand that district, and that's already in place in the ordinance and the comp plan. Should, and I think it was, the wording was, should it become full, I mean, with the residents, with the business, and the original short area right at the corners. So I think the board in compromise, not going all the way to Lyman and coming back, looked at that kind of expansion. But really the biggest change is to the rear, getting some property that probably wouldn't have been able to have been used for very much at all, to now have quite a bit of that.
I guess I don't see that as a good enough reason. big concern. I think part of it is the hope that the large business will come in and take care of the taxes, I guess, but that'll drive up my taxes and possibly force me out. That's what I'm worried about the most. I oppose it.
Thank you.
That question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that question has been asked a number of times, especially sections of the business districts that have expanded into former residential districts. I've consulted with the tax assessor about that, and she says unless you put a use on that property, or if it's the only property that's surrounded by fully developed properties that are commercially used, that are fully developed, she will not assess it as any different than it is currently assessed. She has to have a reason to assess it.
She will not, but she could. Because my understanding is that we are taxed on highest best use.
No,
Not
you're taxed on
current.
current use. You're taxed on current use. For instance, you could be in a residential district, if you have cut a lot out in there, she's still taxing you like $2,000 an acre. If you look at your tax bill, if you're a tax, I think there's some larger property owners here who can attest to that. If you have 30, 40, 100 acres and one house on it, there's very little taxation on the land itself. It's only when you put uses on it that are taxable, and the uses will be developed property, and the property that is high quality construction, new construction. She's very limited in what she can assess. There's a very rigid system they have to follow via the state assessing process to try to get it equalized, because there's so much in the past, you're right. It's very,
So she be the last discussion at the time.
if you want something from them, because it's a legitimate question that
Yeah, a lot of
they want to
people.
know. They want to know. I don't blame you. I'll see if I can get something from them. If I can't get her, then I'll get her a stamp. That'll present. I think it's important. Thank you for bringing it up.
Go ahead.
In looking at this Alfred Road one, and maybe I'm missing something because this is just a section. It doesn't state how big the limit on the size of the business is, or am I missing it?
No,
So there's no limit on the size of the business?
it's restricted based on the amount of land that they have available.
And water and soils?
All of
Okay.
the other things that affect.
Impervious land area and all of the small, it excludes all the small.
Okay, okay.
Are there any other questions on the Alfred Road District? Hearing none. The Business Office Park Industrial District. There were no changes to that section from the original public hearing 2 weeks ago. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm Joe Paolini with the Arundel Cottage Reserve Project. I have written on May 7th, a letter to the planning board through Tad that I would like to read for the record.
Okay.
May I?
You have to speak up, Joe.
I will. As the town of Arundel considers revisions to the land use ordinances, I wish to express my thoughts and concerns. Arundel Cape Port Cottage Preserve LLC has initiated the development of the Cape Arundel Cottages Preserve at 1976 Portland Road. This project, when fully developed, is valued at about approximately $70 million. Consideration must be given to any changes, additions, modifications, etc. to the land use ordinance that will adversely impact the seasonal cottage project. We will construct a first-class development that makes Arundel proud. It will have a very positive impact on Route 1 corridor that attracts other businesses, developments, whereby they in turn will create, develop first-class projects. Our success will also be Arundel's success. Thank you for considering this communication. I've attached a further explanation that I would like to read to you folks. May I?
Yes.
Comments on proposed Arundel zoning text and map amendments. Dear Tad, As you know, I represent a large landowner on Route 1, and we are in the process of investing heavily in the town of Arundel with Cape Arundel Cottage Preserve project. That property is currently Zone B1 and is abutted to the south by properties zoned CCS and R-1. Accordingly, we are very interested in the proposed changes to both the zoning map and the zoning districts along US Route 1, as the decisions made today to develop commercial growth along that corridor will be felt for years to come. We would like to provide the following comments on both the proposed B1 zone amendments and the zoning map amendments, which we reviewed online. Map amendments. We are in agreement to change the lower parcel of the Cape Arundel Cottage Preserve from R1 to B1. This parcel has been designated open space, so it is not affected either way. B1, text amendments. We are supportive of the town's efforts to bolster appropriate scaled business growth along Route 1 corridor with the use of DB1 and DB2, replacing the CCS and other zones. While not in agreement with all the proposed standards of these zones, I am not providing comments at this time. My focus is on more aggressive industrial uses in the B1 district. The B1 district begins at the Cape Arundel Cottage Preserve property and extends northward to the Biddeford line. The proposed amendments, sections 8.256, have added essentially mining and quarries as a conditional use on the premises of creating the pad sites. While this appears to be a business-friendly approach, that language could have detrimental effects by the proposition of blasting for pad sites with no real developments, plans, or infrastructure, sewer, for example, to support a proposed level of development proposed a pad site. We would encourage close examination of this provision, as it may be counterproductive to reasonable development on Route 1 and leave properties open and unattractive as viewed from adjacent land on Route 1. Rather, we would suggest that the ordinance allow blasting, quarrying as part of an approved site plan for development, and I'm adding this, it's not on here, like ours. As we're blasting and we're removing, we're also developing. The specific language comments. Sections 82563A include seasonal cottages or homes within 700-foot limits. And this is more, I don't know if a correction is required here, but under 8256C, you have a comment about slope requirement not, that is 1 to 0. In other words, vertical 1, 0 out. So I think you may want to correct that. And it's still there, so I want to thank you. And again, thank you for listening to this. And do you want this for the record?
Yeah, I have it, but I'll take your sign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm not a resident of Arundel. Am I able to speak?
Public hearing.
It's a public hearing.
My name is Rick Light. I am not a resident, I want to make that clear, but I do a fair amount of work in Arundel, and I'm working on the Arundel Resort project. I'm the engineer for the project. And I'm not going to regurgitate what Joe said, but I want to reiterate. I think the concern with allowing, under the 825 provision, allowing mining or quarrying without a condition that it would be part of it, typically something like that would be part of an approved development. It opens it up basically to scarring the landscape, and in the idea of intending to create and assuming the intent is to create pad sites so that they could be made available for development. I think in the long term, you open yourself up for the opportunity that you scar the landscape and not have any development, and that I think is more detrimental to development overall. And there's a section in here, if I could just, under 825.61 objective, the proposed mineral extraction operation shall be designed, graded, and restored at the termination of the operation so that the property may be immediately developed for business or industrial sites and serviced by roads and utilities infrastructure. That's wishing that development would happen immediately after. I think this leaves that wide open, so we would encourage the board to look closely and reject this as written. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something if I could. Again, Joe Paolini. In my previous life, I worked for the high-tech industry doing facility planning, acquisition, design and development throughout the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, Ireland. One of the things that I used to see were people going in and strip these sites, waiting for companies like us to come along. I was fortunate to be with a Fortune 500 company a few times, and it never happened. And years later, I mean, I've spent almost 20 plus years in that industry. I used to go back sometimes and drive by, there was still strip, open, no developments. So that's from experience, gentlemen, and I'm giving you my knowledge and my experience, not to stop people from doing what they have a right to do. They have a right to do, but, you know, get a development going and then do those things. That way, it still looks beautiful. It's more attractive sometimes to sell something still in its natural state, because some developers, like myself, we're not taking ledge out. We're using it to create features. It's going to be that beautiful rather than just a flat area. So it's my knowledge, my experience for many years, and passing it on for wherever it's worth. Thank you.
Are there any other comments on this section?
We still on 8.25.6, is that correct? And then which
We're
zone?
on 825, the business office, parking, industrial. So yes, that would be part of this.
Right.
And state your name.
Just Wayne Monroe, a Rundle resident,
Thank you.
property owner in the BI section, and in many cases, you may have to mine out some of that ledge in order to do any development, period. There is significant ledge along the Route 1 corridor, as you know. So, you know, if the mineral extraction is a precondition to a development, in many cases that may be necessary. And I believe the standards written and prepared here are very well done. So the planning board would have any control over that in any future application. So we should not shut that off totally. Because if you look at the Arundel cottages right now, what have they been doing for the last 3 months? Mineral extraction. And they're going to use some of those natural resources. On site, there's a lot of piles of riprap up there. That's going to be used for erosion control on site. So we may very well need that mineral extraction in that zone. And the planning board, of course, with all the permits that they've approved, would mitigate any potential consequence from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on? Hearing none, we'll move on to 8.26, the Gateway District. We have had no changes to this district from the last public hearing. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, sir.
I'm really not sure what, you said there's no changes from last time, last public hearing, so what is it, where are we at with that? Are we proposing 1 acre lots, the setbacks are changing? Well, I mean, I have the section, but I didn't find it in the area. Maybe one of the 47 pages up on the table.
Look at page 2, you have that?
I have the 22.6 Gateway District.
Yeah, on page 2 to the table, it has signs of, you're on public water and sewer.
Yeah, I got it. So that's the same as it was last time?
Yes, sir. Nothing has changed.
And this is just a public hearing on this, and then at some point in time, is going to be a vote?
Right, because of the public hearing 2 weeks ago, there were some proposed changes that were made. Those changes were made, we have to have another public hearing.
Okay.
This is part of the ordinance that is going to be going to town meeting, so we've included it as well.
Okay.
Okay?
So I can leave then?
Yes, sir. That's entirely
If you're happy with it, make sure to come to town meeting.
Just make sure you come to town meeting.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions about the Gateway District, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 4. Proposed amendments to the Arundel Land Use Ordinance Map, proposed zoning map changes, which I believe are all up here in the front, are they not?
Anybody need any maps? We can take a minute before you get them.
And again, there was nothing changed in these maps from the last meeting.
This is no limit, I didn't know what you said.
It's not new, what it is it's enhanced. It shows the relationship of the R4 district, the R1, and the R2 districts. That's what it shows. So we're looking at the
It was an enhanced ARD map.
that
Okay.
nothing's changed on the lines. What we did is we made sure that that it was clear where the boundaries were. Because it only showed the ARD, it didn't show the what resulted in the R1, R2, and R4 districts that surrounded
Are
it.
there any questions on the proposed map changes? Hearing none, we'll move on to the district descriptions in section 13. There were this was in all that.
Yeah, okay. But it was, I had to expand on some of those, that's why we're having it up here again now.
Okay. And what it shows you at the top is what sections 13 says right now about the district descriptions, and if there are adjustments made, it lists out what the new description for that section will be. And it lists out, if Article 6 is approved at the town meeting, DB1, DB2, the business park industrial, will be added in. It lists out the various descriptions of what those districts consist of.
And if those ordinances do not, if those warrants for those individual districts do not pass, then it reverts to the existing zoning lines. So there'll be no change from the
Zoning for
existing.
the underlying.
Yeah, the underlying zone remains.
It's been an interesting process. Each of these public hearings are comments that we receive from the townspeople a lot of times, not very many other times, quite a few. So all of these changes actually were recommendations at each of these meetings, and there's been many over the last 2.5 years trying to get to this point. So as we've gotten more and more recommendations, obviously it gets a little better. I'm confident that there will be other changes required once we try to enact all of this stuff. But I think everybody's done a real good job, and obviously we couldn't do it without you guys.
Okay, are there any questions, any comments? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on all of these items. We now have a regular meeting to have. Gentlemen, we need to,
This is good.
what I will call the regular meeting of 413 Oak Street. The agenda is very simple. Motion to forward the revisions to the Board of Selectmen for inclusion in the warrant. The typo error can be fixed once it's put in. Well, before we get into that discussion, I need to have the motion in a second so that we can handle it. We adjourned the special meeting and we're now into the regular. Oh, yes, we're starting now. Yeah, because it will yeah, no, we only have the one issue to decide. Do we send this?
Well, I'll make a motion to send it
And Marty is second. Okay, so now we can have the discussion, and we can always decide what that.
This is, where are you? This is 8.25. The last, midnight, this is the last page. 825.6.3. So it's obvious mistake.
That helps a lot.
Yeah, you could undercut that. Well, I don't think that.
You could go up three, you could go up. I'm on speaker, Dad. It's gonna let you take it down one foot at a time. You can't cut down.
I know,
Yeah, is that straight up? I thought it was. That makes sense.
You have less undermining, okay, and also too, you will have less, chance of fall, okay. You have a flat saying,
I just remember that
we didn't really discuss it, but this is more information purpose for your question.
Anything else that we would like to discuss? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is unanimous? Somebody make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah?
Motion's been made to adjourn. Motion's been seconded.
Yes,